I think Arvi gave a good account just in terms of like, it's the Brooklyn and the Bay Area kids just doing our head check. We're clear, not even thinking twice, and
Yeah.
just like, and then, right away, the like, you know, big pink face, wow, like with the safety vest on and, I just like,
Yeah.
and, and I just, we kind of like, I was just, well, what the hell is going, I just, kind of like, what is going on right now?
Yeah.
And thankfully, I mean, Arby's French is really good. So, I mean, it would have been a different experience if I was dealing with that on my own. Um, but yeah, he wasn't able to talk us out of it. So
That's
we
so
were just
funny.
like, and like, again, like
Yeah.
Arby said, I think it really crystallized, like everything just came sharp
Yes.
out of the, adversity, sharpening
Yes.
our focus, sharpening the,
I know. You had something
everything.
to kind of rally against, isn't that right?
Yes,
Tell me,
that's right.
did you understand like what he was the penalty he was going to give you, or you then had to ask Arvi, or Arvi then told you that guy just gave us, was it a 2 hour penalty?
2 hours. So yeah,
Yeah,
that I,
and
I understood. And, I was, yeah, my French comprehension is better than my verbal, like my
yeah,
speaking, but I was able to, you know, I caught
that's
the gist that we were.
yeah. Like you guys are on these beautiful steel machines, you're used to people just admiring them, and then you meet
Yeah,
some guy who he's not really into the whole thing.
no, no,
Exactly.
and
Oh,
he
that's
just,
funny.
he's paid to
That's
do a job, and
yeah.
he did it, and
This week we have Mark Swier, who lives in Brooklyn, New York City, and rides with the New Jersey Randonneurs. He did his first brevet in 2016 and completed PBP 2023 in a time of 85:39. I got Mark's name from Arvi, who rode with him PBP 2023. Arvi talks a lot about Mark in glowing terms, so I don't want to be disappointed, Mark, okay? All right. I want to hear your perspective because Arvi gets everything wrong. Okay. First question. What does PBP mean to you?
thanks, Peter. I I think PvP was like an unprecedented in my adult life, um, exploration of and investment in my own sense of adventure and curiosity and boundaries. So sort of
Yeah.
thinking about it in sort of at a high level. Um, I became a parent in 2009. And so I had some younger kids when I first started. When I rode my first brevet, the kids were a little bit younger, and so it's just like trying to figure out how this phase of my life could be compatible with this interest and dream, that takes up a lot of time
Yeah.
and is a big investment of not only my time but of my loved ones and the people who I'm accountable to.
Yeah.
So yeah, just that this experience showed me that was that this kind of adventure was possible for me in my life, and
Yeah.
that I can advance like my hopes, my dreams,
Yeah.
and interests while still being the person that I want to be, um, for my loved ones. So yeah.
Mark, I should have actually asked you this, but my research is always very poor. So, what age are you now, and what age were you when you did PBP 23?
Right. So I'm 45 now,
Okay.
and so what I was 43.
Yeah. You look
Very,
good, Mark. You look very young to me.
thank
I was going to say 30s, but okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks,
Okay.
Peter.
What did the finish line feel like?
Oh, what yeah. So in those, in light of that, sort of what it meant to me, it was just like this just incredible rush of emotion and just all that was present for me. Like I was present with all the people who
Yeah.
extended themselves to support me in this endeavor and this accomplishment, and with all that I had put into achieving it. And so just overwhelmingly humbling and
Yeah.
emotional, and uh, like pride in a way that for me, and
Yeah.
like this little slice of this moment in history in my life and the people around me, that like
Yeah.
was quite incredible, like quite unprecedented and just and overwhelming. So yeah,
That's
I
cool.
don't allow myself like a lot of pride, but like just
That's
regularly,
good.
maybe not enough. But this was a moment I was just like, oh, I can't believe it, just
Yeah,
like.
I
And we
like it.
came in. I'll say more about this, but we came in the morning, like the way our start wave, the way things panned out, came
Yeah,
into a sunrise. Like just that last 50 miles in was just glorious.
yeah, remarkable. Great. Okay. So next question, let's just take a step back. Let's talk
Yeah.
about your background in cycling, maybe your earliest memory on a bike. Why do you ride? How does it feel? A lot of different questions there, but you kind of get the gist.
Yeah, I grew up riding. My dad always rode as a commuter and for joy and pleasure and dragged us around in the 80s on early Burley, probably one of the first Burley trailers in growing up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And then
Wow.
I remember like learning how to ride, and I got a hand me down, it was like a Diamondback BMX bike, all chromed out.
Yeah.
And then I left it outside the candy store and it got stolen.
Oh, no.
And that was very formative. And my dad and we were, searching the neighborhood for the culprit,
Yeah.
and it didn't come. Just like formative,
Yeah.
like a bicycle
Yeah.
memories. But yeah, like my dad was always a rider, and then my uncle was really into cycling, and he passed like during COVID,
Oh,
and he had a couple of years prior, he had told me about the story about his and my mom's maybe great grandfather, who was a carpenter in Western Michigan and was killed by a car while riding.
wow.
And
Wow.
so I like had this interesting, like, I hadn't heard that story before. And it
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
so it's been in my family, and it was always, a way that I think having adventures as family. I have two younger brothers, and
Yeah.
a lot of
Mark,
times on the
yeah.
bike.
Mark, you were just telling me just before we started that I think all your grandparents were from Holland. Is that correct?
Yeah. So
So,
Dutch immigrant family.
yeah.
My my dad's mom was born in Kampen in the Netherlands, in and then the other sort of side, both sides of the family either were sort of, their parents were born in the Netherlands and immigrated.
Yeah.
Um,
And
yeah.
do you, were they all like that's what we always think about when we think of the Netherlands, right? Everyone's on these high bicycles, dressed up, on their way to work. Were they? Did they kind of bring some of that from the Netherlands, or they weren't really cyclists?
I wouldn't say they're particularly like that it was that
Yeah.
deep. They were educators and farmers and and workers
Yeah.
and caregivers. But so, bikes were always around. I think that process of
Yeah.
Americanization and assimilation. Some things come through, and some things
Yeah.
don't come through. But I think there was a strain. There was a
Yeah.
thread to pull on when it came my time. So
Yeah. Like it's unusual. Your father used to commute everywhere, brought you guys on that Burley. That's
yeah,
maybe I don't know something was
yeah,
coming happening
yeah.
in his genes there. Who knows? Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. It was sort of unusual at that time in the 80s. Growing up to be dragging around that Burley trailer at that time.
Yeah. And in more recent times, why do you ride? How does it make you feel? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I I started really riding at like when I became a parent. I was kind of like, I don't. I was having to take care of a fleet, and I had sort of ridden around, practically. I hadn't really started like riding
Yeah.
for pleasure. And I was just like, I got to learn how to take care of these bikes. I don't want to have
Yeah.
to bring in a
Yeah.
bike to a shop, um, to change a flat or to dial in brakes or, um, you know, um, any just deal with any mechanical stuff. So I started learning and tinkering,
Yeah.
and then I started riding and just kind of like really started to enjoy it. I had always been a soccer player, and that was
Yeah.
starting to wear and tear after sort of 30 years of playing soccer was catching up with me. And so I was looking
Yeah.
for a way to kind of just push myself and have adventures.
Yeah.
And
A-
that's sort of like
And
early it. Yeah, I think
yeah.
2014, 15. Yeah.
And were you already living in New York at that time or not?
Yeah. I moved to Brooklyn in 2005,
Okay, well, let's talk
2005,
about the Brooklyn
2006.
biking scene
Yeah.
because that's kind of fascinating. So, Prospect Park, is that what you all do? You ride around that in circles, or how does it work?
Yeah. There's a lot of that. That's the whole
Okay.
scene. I think as a randonneur in Brooklyn and in the boroughs, like, well, it's on this side of mm, the East River, it's like we can go out to Long Island or we can cross and do the route up to Nyack, um, and that gets us out of town. It takes you got to ride a ways to get to some real
Yeah.
hills, etc. But I'll ride in the loops. But I like to ride down in Jamaica Bay. There's some perms that we're growing all the time, and one of our local folks who's part of the New Jersey club, Will Sherman, just became the RBA for Long Island, and so excited to support him and growing out that region, and that infrastructure, and just come up with more cool routes
Yeah.
out on Long Island. We hosted the first, NJR, New Jersey crew hosted the first brevet since I started. That was like started and finished in Central Brooklyn at Grand Army Plaza. So that was 2 weekends ago, and went
That's
out the
amazing.
North Shore of Long Island. It was like 5,600 feet of climbing on a 200K. So it was, it gets some nice rollers, very PVP-esque rollers on the
Yeah.
North Shore. Um, so that was great. And then there's another brevet in 2 weekends that's starting in Gowanus, Brooklyn, of all places, um,
Okay. Yeah.
at Principal's Coffee Shop, which is owned and operated by a local randonneur who's
That's
she's
cool.
yeah. So there's like a building kind of
Yes.
growing effort to make, I think, randonneuring more accessible in the sense that, like, I don't have to drive a car to a place where I start a ride at 6 in the morning in New Jersey, which has been a lot of my experience. Um, so
Yeah.
hopefully that,
I
continues
yeah.
to build. I'm looking forward
I
to that.
lived in New York for 2 years, and I live in the
Yeah.
upper west side, and I had this old Gary Fisher mountain bike, and I used
Oh
to
yeah.
ride across the George Washington Bridge, and I really enjoyed the experience. It was fun.
Yeah. If you're uptown or in the Bronx,
Yeah.
like, you can get out pretty easy. I like to make
Yeah.
routes also, like with my kids, to like take the train up to Westchester and then just
Yeah.
get out and do some camping or whatever. There's in New York, yeah, there's so many, like in the Bay, there's so many different ways to ride, and
Yeah.
but for randonneurs, I think there's it's becoming increasingly accessible, and I'm looking forward to that
That's
growth.
amazing. That's
Yeah.
cool. And so you did your first brevet, I think 2016. Maybe talk about that and also how you first heard those three letters PBP.
Yeah. So I had, when I started, like, to be serious more about learning about bikes, I was, it was heavy blog era. So I, like, started
Okay.
nerding out about, like, what type of
Yeah.
cycling is interesting. And I wasn't a
Okay.
racer, I wasn't a messenger,
Yeah.
but, like, oh, this I found, probably through Sheldon Brown or Bicycle Quarterly, and I found, like, Mary Gerson's Chasing Mailboxes blog, and
Oh, that's
and
great.
Ed Felker's blog. I know you talked to them. I haven't got to watch
Yeah.
that video yet, but
Yeah.
it was a pleasure to, so I'd read all their stuff for years,
Yeah.
and just was like, maybe I can do this. Maybe I could try this sometime.
Yes.
And that was a huge accomplishment, just to get to the place where I was going to have my first brevet.
Yeah.
And that was the NYC 200 that starts uptown near the entrance to the GW, to the George
Okay.
Washington Bridge. So it starts there, and then you go up towards Bear Mountain, and so that was like easy, kind of like it was an accessible starting point for me.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Can I can I ask you a quick question? Like, the
yeah,
stereotype from someone here from the West Coast thinks Brooklyn and maybe just like biking it's about the equipment and all that kind of stuff, which I personally, that's who I am as well. Just so, is that the case?
yeah.
Are you like big into bikes in general? Is that right?
In
Okay.
general,
Okay.
I'm lucky to live in an apartment building that
Yeah.
has good parking in the basement.
Nice.
And so I've taken over a whole corner. I got a
Yeah.
couple of tandems. I got a cargo bike. I got all the kids' bikes. It's probably, I'm not going to say a number because
Okay. Yeah. I
I don't
have
want to
the
make it
exact
hot.
Yeah, I have the exact same setup downstairs where I'm in San Francisco, and yeah, there's quite a few bikes in there. So yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm still, yeah, I'm a little bit, I'm reaching my threshold. I'm not fully like N plus one, but I'm like
Yeah,
just like, yeah, trying to. I think people are there's all in the Bay, like there's like all types of scenes. Like there's a huge gravel adventure cycling,
yep,
scene that people are really getting out exploring the Catskills, doing stuff in from. It's like
yeah.
it takes a little bit of work and planning, but it's totally possible.
And I suspect you were kind of drawn to the randonneuring biking. Is it like the actual equipment itself? Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. I liked
Okay.
how accessible, I like, just like learning about the machine, just like
Yeah,
really learning about how to fix and service and like,
yeah,
tearing, that part of working with my hands, the mechanical part, and like feeling like capable and confident, dealing
that's
with
great.
all the drivetrain issues, dealing with, I know Arvi talked about the sort of, the French cosplay, the sort of
Yeah,
steel random bikes. And I think
yeah.
part of that is like, yes, absolutely. And part of
Okay.
the accessibility of like steel machines, mechanical brakes, rim brakes,
Yeah,
like the reasons people take to that, whether in the US or elsewhere, is at least resonant for me in terms of like, I can fix this. I can figure this out in a way
so
that
true.
some of the new stuff that's more tech heavy or like, I'm just kind of like, it's a
Yeah.
little too much.
Um, okay, so then let's talk about your first brevet. You said you could do this. I've read everything about this sport. I know everything. So
Yeah. Yeah.
what was it? What was it like?
It's,
Yeah.
yeah, it was a lot of work. It was a
Yeah.
great challenge. It was
Yeah.
like, I think that experience of like just all the distances,
Yeah.
like finding, running is so much about like just figure out a way to have like a goal and accomplish it. And like, whether you get a trinket for it or not, or it's like in your head and in your
Yeah.
heart, it's like, I think building the miles to be like, oh, I can ride 50 miles. I can ride 70 miles. I
Yeah.
can probably ride 100 miles. I think just the
Yeah.
build up to that was amazing. And then on that ride, I got taken under the wing by this motley crew of hilarious veteran weirdos called the Fist of Xanax. So I got to shout out the Fist.
Oh
and
my God,
and
really?
yeah, they're like,
So
everybody in the region
self-described, they call
knows about the
themselves.
Fist. The Fist, yeah, the
That's
Fist of
so funny.
Xanax, self-described randonneuring
Yeah.
crew. Uh, and these are old heads, like they're
Yeah.
veterans, they're OGs. And Gil LeBron took me under his wing. Christoph Buckler, who's now back in Germany,
Yeah.
was here. Mike Gorman, Chris Slocum, and folks. Will Sherman. They really were like, it was like a good fit, like
Yeah.
clowning and then just pace wise, but also serious
Yeah.
and determined. And I'm sort of middling. I'm like not fast and I'm not the slowest, but I have
Yeah.
good like, I have good, I think troubleshooting, patience, and good relationship to suffering. And,
Yeah. A healthy one.
so
Yeah.
yeah.
And if
And
that doesn't
so
work, just take a Xanax. That's why they like you,
that's
obviously.
right.
Okay.
They dragged me along and said, you got this. And they, like
Yeah.
waited for me when I flatted and got me across the finish on my first
That's
brevet.
great.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and it was, yeah. Yeah.
And Mark, did you just were curious about doing a brevet, that you had no intention of doing a PBP at that time? Is that correct? Or you didn't even know much about it?
It just felt like pie in the sky. I think I read
Okay.
about it probably early because I think I started subscribing to BQ
Yeah.
pretty early. And I was just kind of like, oh, taking it one step at a time.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh my gosh, someday, like if someday I'd like to do this. Like, and it just
Yeah.
felt like,
That's so cool.
couldn't imagine. Yeah. And it was it was a few years where like, I think I even wrote another brevet and then yet, let alone got to the next, it might've been 19, might have been 18 or 19 when I even wrote another brevet in terms of
Yeah.
where life was at, where my commitments were at. And, and then it was really in the lead up, I think, the year after coming out of COVID, and then really in the lead up, the 2 years
Yeah.
lead up to PBP, that I really rode my first series,
Yeah.
rode my first series, and got started
Yeah.
thinking
I
about it. Maybe I could do this.
I always ask people this just generally. Did COVID, all that stuff, change your biking behavior?
Yeah, it did. I mean, I think I'm not the most consistent. Like, it helps that like the PvP lead up like really helped me have the structure to like build and build and to really
Yeah.
grow. But I'm not like religiously out riding the track 3 days a week, or like doing the repetition thing it just doesn't work for me in how I
Yeah.
kind of live my life. And that COVID period really threw it off. I started riding out and doing some rides like for like at a certain point, but I never got like, I think the ways that people were trying to self organize around like on train, like doing brevets on trainers, or like the stuff where it was like there were actually things being attempted that I didn't necessarily plug into until we were out of the woods with COVID.
Yeah. So then you did a few more brevets. The sickness started evolving, and then you said, I'm going to do PBP. Is that correct?
I think at that
Yeah.
point I was like, I knew it was coming up. My kids were a little bit older. I think our like division of labor with parenting was in a place where I thought that with the inputs and the outputs, I could find a balance
Yeah.
around training and doing series. And
Yeah.
yeah, so early on I talked with my partner, and we just kind of think it made sense. And
That's
so it's like,
cool.
okay, let's do it.
And then how did you kind of formulate some kind of strategy for PBP itself?
I I had wanted to do. I attended like the season before PBP year was so 22. I'd intended to do like a series and then ride at least like 1,000 or even a
Interesting.
1,200, which I hadn't done before. I hadn't ridden a full series before, and I hadn't done
Yeah.
one of the higher distances. And and so the series went well, and then I think there was a 1,000K plan for September or late August, and it got canceled.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
and so that was my intention. And then I was reading more stuff and talking to people, and I think the approach that is kind of like ride the series. You don't have to ride the full amount before you do your first 1,200, whether it's PvP or a different one. But like ride the series really, I think, like especially in the 600, and really work on being like your orientation to sleep as much as possible. But that it's a sound strategy to ride a series and then work on
Yeah.
speed and hills in the like 6 weeks out, 6 to 8 weeks out. And so that's what I ended up just gambling on. At a certain point, I had
Yeah.
to really be like, make a, um, make my peace with like, I can give it this much.
Yeah.
And I can
I
see
understand.
that like, if I was able to give it more,
Yeah.
where that would give me in terms of my strength on the hill, like on hills, or my speed.
Yes.
But like, this is what I can give it. I'm giving it everything I
Yes.
can. And I had to sort of, and that was sometimes a struggle, but
Yeah.
generally I found some level of equanimity with that.
Yeah. And did you know others from other clubs, nearby clubs that were going? Like, did you have any friends that were going, or this was kind of a solo effort?
Well, I got to ride, I think the 300. I rode with DCR in DC, and I got to ride with Mary and Ed for a little bit, and meet
Okay.
them for the first time, and that was
Yeah,
really,
that's great.
I
Yeah.
was like, got to fangirl out with them, and just like kind of get dusted by them as their tandem
Yeah.
climbed the first hill,
Uh,
you know,
yeah.
um, just get dropped.
Yeah.
But it was great, and then like the New Jersey folks, bunch of folks from the Fist, and like
Yeah. Well, let's get back to
others.
the fist.
Yeah.
That's my real
Let's get back
question.
to the
So,
Fist.
okay, was the whole fist crew doing it or not?
not the whole, but like the
Okay.
majority. Like I think, and folks are there. These guys are doing all kind of stuff. There's different representatives of the FIS all over the world riding 1200s at any given time. There's
Cool.
like, it's just like, and it's, this weird assortment of people you might find in a major
Yeah.
city, like everyone from like urban planning types to surgeons to engineers to like
Yes.
community
Yeah.
organizers,
Yeah. That's
who
funny.
are just doing this thing together that has nothing to do with whatever the hell else you do in your life.
Yeah.
But there's some people with a lot of time and
Yeah.
money to burn, and they're like, doing, people are riding LEL this summer, and people riding in
That's
Italy,
great.
and
Yeah.
um, and so there was like a crew that I think it was like, I know Vadim Gritsas was out, Chris Slocum was out, and I don't think Gil or Will or Mario rode. No, they didn't ride 23. They had ridden
Yeah.
the
That's
the
cool.
in
Yeah.
in 19.
Yeah.
And they're one of their things, one of the lessons that I always gleaned from those guys. And Bill Olson is kind of the elder statesman, and he's got like big numbers in Rusa. I think he's got a 3-digit ID,
Yeah.
like Rusa number. But he's kind of like, one of the things that they're just have no problems with is DNFing. Like it's like that's part of the game. Early on for me, I was like, I can't.
Yeah.
I'd be so
Believe it.
devastated if I couldn't.
Yeah.
And that's just like, that was always, I think, just kind of all the pitfalls, all the potential, like,
Yeah.
roadblocks, problems, ways that things can go wrong are just natural. They're
Yeah.
naturally a part of it, and we can't
That's
get too
great.
worked up about it. And that's kind of
Yeah.
an ethos of this
Yeah.
set of folks that I really appreciate.
So then, Mark, you decide you're going to fly to France. Any kind of thoughts about the logistics? You're on the East Coast, so maybe not as bad, but it's still challenging. Like I would imagine with a family, you didn't have a huge amount of time.
One of my friends told me, she's a pediatrician. She When she traveled with her family, I saw her like earlier probably in the spring of 23, and she told me about this app to sort of start sleep training. And so you start to sleep earlier, go to sleep earlier, and wake up earlier. You start to get acclimated like in the 2 weeks prior. You don't start
Yeah.
it much, maybe in the 10 days prior. I forget the name of it now, but I think there's several options for this. But I actually was like, that seems good. And I did that. It really was consequential in the like 5 days prior, where I had to like really change things. But I think that was a good approach around sleep. I like, I got a good bike box. I invested in a bike and a good box instead of doing
Yeah.
cardboard or whatever. I think that's obviously always part of it. And
Yeah.
just, but one of the things that was challenging for me was like, I had a bike built for me by our local keeper of the flame, Johnny Coast, in the winter prior. And there was timing around that. I was not smart about the timing around that. So one of my lessons big time was like just like, and reflections was like, I think I didn't have everything dialed in with my machine where it needed
Yeah.
to be in time. You know what I mean? So like, I think figuring out all that stuff as far in advance as possible, as many veteran Redditors will tell you, like was for me like absolutely true. And it was an important lesson I learned to my
Okay.
detriment.
That's
um,
good.
so getting there, and like, I think I flew on Wednesday, and my start time was Sunday, like 6:45 p.m. L wave. And so I
Yeah.
like had a date, like fly in Wednesday night, Thursday morning, build the bike Thursday, shakedown. And then I had like all day Friday to kill. And so I just rode into Paris. I stayed in a small town, like I think 2 train stops out from um Rambouillet, and I'm forgetting the name right now.
Yeah.
I'll remember it in a second. But it was like I did a 50-mile loop of Paris and just saw everything, ate everything, like
Yeah.
just kind of bombed around with no set schedule. I like
Yeah.
went to like on some pilgrim, I went to Cycle La Rouen, and I went to
Yeah.
Alex Singer. and
So
they were
cool.
already they were already gone. They were already in
Okay.
Rambouillet with their tent set up,
Yeah.
unbeknownst to me. But I got to
Yeah.
just, and then I saw the touristy things and just had
Yeah.
just a lovely time in a way that I never get to do, in my life.
Yeah.
Like just completely have a day riding around a
Yes.
beautiful a city.
Yeah. And I remember because I, like you, arrived a few days early in 2019 and also
Mhm,
2023.
mhm.
You have this kind of building nervousness in your stomach and you don't know where it's coming from. Like, and then you realize, oh my God, like somewhere deep in there, this is a big deal, right? Isn't that right?
Absolutely, like
Yeah.
buzzing, completely.
Yes.
And then you kind of like, what do I do with this energy? So it's good
Exactly.
to just gotta. I know some people went out like
Yeah.
further afield at the hotel. Just that's where I met RV and Brian White from Portland. We kind of were just, we were nerding out about steel bikes,
Nice. Yeah.
ogling each other's machines
That's exactly it. Yeah.
and that was totally just wonderful part of that
Yes.
couple days in the lead up. Um,
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a quick question about your bike
yeah,
then. So, built by Johnny Coast. I like that name
yeah,
already, by the way. That's cool.
yeah,
And what were your kind of requirements?
yeah. So I wanted, pretty, kind of traditional, like 4630 double, um, handlebar bag. I really like am into like, I just RV and I found each other for a reason. It was like, oh, you're into some stuff that I'm into.
Yeah,
And yeah, so
it's
like
kind of
just
it was kind of a meet cute that involves steel bikes, not actual the humans meeting. It was just the two steel
yeah,
bikes meeting. Okay.
completely, completely.
Yeah.
And at that point I didn't one thing I didn't have dialed in was my saddle issues. So
Okay. An issue. Yeah, okay.
that became an issue. I thought I got it as close as I could. I got things in place, but I think,
Cool.
so at that point I didn't have, you know, leather saddle. It was like, pretty traditional kind of randonneur,
Nice.
setup.
Yes.
I was running like including like, I think I was running Mayfac raids that I had gotten from French eBay, and then I refurbished myself. I built the bike myself, and
Great.
then I was running these TA cranks that ultimately like didn't play nice with my IRD derailleurs, and that also became an
Ouch.
issue. So again, it was
Okay.
just
Nice. Some
like
foreshadowing. A lot of foreshadowing. Okay.
foreshadowing, and I
Yeah.
went for the like classic build, but like didn't take enough time in the lead up to ensure like
Yeah.
one 1000% that everything was as dialed in as it could be. So yeah, that turned into issues later.
So let's talk about then the start line. How did you feel? Describe the scene.
Yeah, I mean, it was electric. It was just like, I think watching the 80 hour. I went in to Rambouillet like early in the day, so I had a 6:45 start, and then that was one thing. Like for that, like if you're starting later in the day, it's maybe nicer to stay close to, if you can get a hotel closer, uh, because I had to sort of like check out and then be in kind of just hanging out all
And
day,
it
which
was
is like,
hot as
it
well. It
was
was very,
hot.
yeah.
And so I think just some planning around what you're going to do with your energy, and trying to rest and just relax in the time before you start. But I got to watch I watched the other waves and just kind of soaking up that energy, making sure I was fueling up, and
Yeah.
staying hydrated. And
And Mark,
yeah.
were you riding with anyone? Was that your plan, or you were just gonna, take it as it came?
So I have a friend Mariano from here in Brooklyn who rides the NJR rides with me, and also Boris. They were like, not my same start time, but they were like or they were around me. We were keeping in touch, and I think at that point I wasn't sure where RV like was I think we found each other really on the course.
Yeah.
Then we didn't we didn't coordinate. I mean, I think that's part of the beauty and
Yeah.
magic of it all. It's just like
Yeah.
being able to like kind of prepare to ride your own ride, but also like having people is completely lovely and can be necessary, you know, like very,
Yeah.
just like for energy, for morale,
Yeah, it's true.
you
So
know.
anyway, so you took
Yeah.
off. Was it faster, the original start? Maybe just, yeah, let's just go through the whole thing.
Yeah.
So then you took off, you're excited. Then what happened?
6:45, took it out,
Yeah.
you know, took it out faster than, you know, it just the excitement of it all. And, but with my eyes open, you know, full of making intentional choices,
Yeah.
being generally like aware and not pushing it too hard, but like being like, I think it's one thing that's amazing. And I haven't had the privilege of riding in as much, a hugely diverse set of regions in the United States. So I don't know like pace lining culture in different regions. In New Jersey, it's not huge. And that, you know, part of like, you know, the terrain we're riding in and like, you know, how do people practice and culturally as a sort of group of humans, the thing that, you know, like, it just wasn't something that I had the opportunity to fully practice. And like, and then in PBP, all of a sudden you're like in pace lines major and you can really work through it. And I was
Yeah.
hungry for that, you know? So I think,
Yeah.
so the speed also had to do it. It was faster coming out the gate, but also like wasn't necessarily burning the type of energy that I would be had I just been on my own. And that sort of later start was also, so I feel like the end was beautiful. Also the start was beautiful to go into the night, that like
Yeah.
line of taillights, red taillights down, these gently sloping into the dark as far as the
Yeah.
eye can see was
Amazing.
just magical.
Yeah.
And yeah. And so like, yeah, I think Arvi talked about like we rode, I think we found each other at some point then, maybe at the first control, or I don't have in my notes when we actually linked up, but then we linked up and we rode through to Ludiak and before our first big sleep.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
And do
And
you
at that
remember?
and heading out, sorry to cut across you. I think heading out, I was like, I'm going to just my initial plan was just to ride as long as I can until I really feel like I need to sleep. Like I didn't have like in terms of the initial, it was just like, I gotta take that part as it comes. I'm not going to plan. And like, you know, I think Vadim, who I ride with a lot, he was like, he got his own hotels, like along the route. He does that thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, no,
No.
I'm just going to see how it
Yeah.
goes. And
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah. So then, you and Arvi just ended up kind of hanging out with each other and riding. Tell me, were you you were sort of in the bulge, is that right? Like there was a lot of, so you'd go into a control, there's a lot of people. Was that overwhelming or not?
Yeah. I think I didn't get too stressed out about how long it took when I was in it. Cause it was kind of like, what are you going to do? I didn't. And I think I was cognizant of it and also just kind of like barreling kind of tunnel vision, like just like,
Okay. Yeah.
uh, and I think I didn't have, I think in the planning,
Yeah.
like the way some people are like, I'm going to like get food at grocery stores, but just hightail it in and out of the control, get my card stamped and try not to eat. I think maybe I'll experiment with that in the future. Because I
Yeah.
think the eating and sitting, it's like, if you're going to sleep elsewhere, you're going to rest in a different way. That can be, I think that's a recipe. That's a sound strategy that I ultimately, like,
Yeah.
I didn't really engage in and certainly in the first part,
Yeah.
and the first half.
And it sounded
Yeah.
like you both made good time though, isn't that right? So everything was going well. Did you have sort of at least an idea of, okay, I'm 3 hours ahead of my plan, or was that even a thing for you?
I would say for me, so RV is like very data driven.
Yeah, exactly.
He's like that. He's very technical. So it was good
Yeah,
to like, I mean, that was an amazing
yeah,
thing that he brought to the table. And also, so I was more a little bit like, I wasn't, I'm just not that type of rider. And I don't have enough experience on the
yeah,
grand brevets, like the longer ones, to be like really coherent and sharp enough to think through, I'm
completely.
this far behind and I need to do this to do this. Cause I'm just in the phase of my development where it's like,
Yeah,
I'm doing the best
okay,
I can. I am paying
nice.
attention to when the controls open and close, but
Yeah,
that in itself also seems hard for me to
Oh,
Like,
completely. No, I think that's so standard, right? You
yeah,
keep trying to do math in your head, but you can never get to the end of the equation. And even if you do, you don't retain the answer, so you keep going back again and again.
yeah,
Yeah. So when
completely.
was the first maybe challenge? Like when did things start going maybe south, if they did at all?
Yeah, I think there was like I remember feeling like um, at Ludiak is what's the distance at Ludiak?
I think it's about, would it be about 800 maybe? No,
That's
no,
yeah,
no, no, that's sorry.
seven
No,
eighty
it's not.
two, seven
That's
eighty
on
two,
the way
or is
back.
that
So
that's the return?
yeah. So it's probably
That's of
around
course,
400. Would it be 400 maybe? Maybe a bit
yeah.
more. Yeah.
So, yeah, I started having ass issues like at a certain
Okay.
point. You know,
Nice.
it was like, oh, that's not good.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel great.
No.
And
No.
then and I had my tools of the trade because at that point, I was kind of like going in like really kind of fingers crossed because
Yes.
I had ridden the series and I had discomfort and I was
Yeah.
working up like what is it, the lidocaine. I
Yeah.
was using that, and then I was using some of this like rub. It was like almost
Yeah.
like a stick, like waxy stick, roll-on stick, and I just started applying that, and it's like, okay, here we are. This is what it's presenting, and then
Okay.
and then at a certain point, and I can't remember also the sort of mechanical issue. I think it was after the turnaround and after our run in with the municipal militia or the Brittany militia.
Yeah.
Um, but my front derailleur just stopped work. Like it just wasn't working.
Oh,
So I
that's
was
funny.
like, I was manual. I was just
Yeah.
like thinking like when I had to
Yeah.
drop to my small gear on the climbs, I'd have to like reach down and fish it back up
Old
for
school.
basically the
You must
second
have
half.
enjoyed that. Yeah. Old school. Good.
At a certain, and that thankfully didn't throw me off. I kind of just was dialed in enough where I was just like, this is what it is. And
Yeah.
after that experience with the, um, with this running this red light and this cop,
Well,
threatening to,
let's talk.
yeah,
I think that deserves its own. Tell us about what
sure.
happened there.
Yeah. So like Arvi said, coming out of Brest and the turnaround and, just the emotion of that and the sort of beautiful, taking our photos on the bridge, et cetera. And just like really being excited about that. I think RV gave a good account just in terms of like, it's the Brooklyn and the Bay Area kids just doing our head check. We're cleared, not even thinking twice, and
Yeah.
just like, and then, right away, the like, you know, big pink face, wow, like with the safety vest on and, I just like,
Yeah.
and, we kind of like, I was just, well, what the hell is going, I just, kind of like, what is going on right now?
Yeah.
And thankfully, I mean, RV's French is really good. So, I mean, it would have been a different experience if I was dealing with that on my own. Um, but yeah, he wasn't able to talk us out of it. So
That's
we
so
were just
funny.
like, and like, again, like
Yeah.
Arvi said, I think it really crystallized, like everything just came sharp
Yes.
out of the, adversity, sharpening
Yes.
our focus, sharpening the,
I know. You had something
everything.
to kind of rally against, isn't that right?
Yes,
Tell me,
that's right.
did you understand like what he was the penalty he was going to give you, or you then had to ask Arvi, or Arvi then told you that guy just gave us, was it a 2 hour penalty?
2 hours. So yeah,
Yeah,
that
and
I understood. And, I was, yeah, my French comprehension is better than my verbal, like my
yeah,
speaking, but I was able to, you know, I caught
that's
the gist that we were,
yeah. Like you guys are on these beautiful steel machines. You're used to people just admiring them, and then you meet
yeah,
some guy who he's not really into the whole thing.
no, no.
Exactly.
And
Oh,
he
that's
just,
funny.
he's paid to
Yes.
do a job and
Yeah.
he did it. And,
And at that,
so
well, at that point, did you think, okay, how many hours, do you remember how long it took you to get to Brest?
I don't, right.
Okay, but
Should pull up my
was the
thing.
2 hours a threat to you, getting there by 90 hours, getting home by 90 hours?
Well,
Do you
so and it
remember?
was interesting. I remember. So I was telling the story. I was in the group chat with the Fist guys, and they were cheering me on, like, you know, you're gonna be good. They were really concerned around the closing times on the controls. So
Yeah.
getting behind, and I think there was a clarification at a certain point. We asked on the return, like, what's the penalty and or like what's the threat here if we're coming in, if we're pushing the limit on the open and close times for the controls, and at two different controls there was like, it was kind of like pretty relaxed, and like
Yes.
that was like an answer we got, like, don't worry about that, just keep moving. And so that was, I think that in terms of like the potential penalty of going from a 90-hour kind of time horizon to an 88-hour, um there was a couple elements. Yeah. So there was the control times element, and then there was the just like, what's the total
Yeah.
that we have left. So yeah, I think Harvey explained. I recall it being like, okay, we can do this. One is like, we can do this, and it was like,
Yeah.
we're not gonna let this be the end of our
Right.
ride. We're gonna like, can we figure out how to do this? And then we just doing the math and sitting with it and be like, we can do this. It's like, generally it was like a 3 hours on, 15-minute nap.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
was like with like, I think 2 hours extra kind of discretionary flex.
Yeah.
And we needed all of that, but that was it was a good plan, and it
Mm.
generally worked. Like, I
Yes.
think, and that included us needing to do our own thing. Like, I
Yeah.
know I took like an hour nap at a certain point, and we leapfrogged each other, and then we caught up later. And he similarly, I think he had a different, like, longer nap at a certain
Yeah.
point. But then, yeah, I mean, like Arvi explained, we really were for quite a good chunk of the return. We were like 3 hours on. We set alarms. We, you know, find a nice spot to take the nap, to take the
Yeah.
ditch nap, and I had so much fun taking photos of just the zombie apocalypse of
Completely.
randonneurs passed out. I
Yeah.
loved
Yeah.
your conversation with Arby about that, but it just was like, I just got
Yeah.
such a kick.
It's like a
Um,
natural disaster. I like to tell people, which isn't a nice thing to say, but it's like Jonestown, basically, or something. That's terrible, I know, but
yeah,
okay. Um,
I'm
so,
here for it.
so how many hours sleep do you think you got total?
Total, I think I probably got five.
Okay. And was there any time after the cop gave you those 2 additional hours that you said, I'm not going to make it?
No,
Okay, good. So
I mean,
it
there,
was,
yeah, as far as like emotionally and
yeah,
or like really thinking through the plan, if I didn't hit a point at which I was like, physically or, yeah, like psychologically, yeah, I didn't
yeah,
find, I didn't reach that point where I wasn't dialed in. I just was,
yeah, that's great.
we were dialed in.
Yeah,
And we knew we were going to need to, like, like, if we had gone to sleep and not woken up,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
that would have been a problem. That would have
yeah,
been panic stations, but
yeah.
we just didn't reach that. We
That's
kept
wonderful.
grinding and
Yeah,
kept moving forward. Pedal
no,
came up, we pushed it down again.
yeah,
Just all those
yeah.
mantra, drawing on
It,
all the mantra.
yeah, it sounds like you were very lucky to find each other because you worked really well together after that.
Oh
But
yeah.
when you think about it, it was probably Arvy's fault that you got those 2 hours. When I think about
But
it, I think it was his fault. Who was
I,
first through the red light?
I definitely think it was Arby's fault.
Oh, go there you go. There, you're the
Yeah, I'm
victim
gonna
here.
back you
Okay,
up on that.
okay.
Absolutely.
So then, was there a time maybe you're 100 kilometers out and you're thinking, you know what, we are going to do this? Do you remember that at all? Do you remember just feeling? I think you said you arrived at the finish line in the early hours.
Yeah.
Was it an amazing feeling as you got closer and closer?
Yeah, that last like 100 miles. I mean, it was kind of, it's kind of like, yeah, you don't, you're sort of holding out till into the last moment when you can kind of like just feel solid about, like,
Yes.
this is happening.
That
This
is,
is going to
yeah,
happen.
Mark, that is so true because you're almost afraid to start counting your chickens or anything. You know that you cannot do that. But then there does come a point where,
There
huh,
comes that point.
Yeah, I'm not that far away. I think I'm going to do this. That's cool.
Yeah, and I tend to, I'm, not unique, but like I do get I solidly like tend to finish strong. Like the last sort of 50 miles
Okay.
of brevets, I like get an energize, I get that
Yeah,
extra couple
it's
of
amazing.
percent where it's just like
Yeah,
it pulls me forward. And yeah, that happened for us in the golden
yeah.
glorious sunset, riding in those winding roads through the forest.
Amazing, amazing.
Yeah.
So, Mark, I've got three more questions for you.
Yeah.
Um, Before I ask you, are you going to do it again? I'm going to ask you about the people of France, the supporters, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Any comments about that?
Yeah. I mean, that kind of just the depth of history and the cultural kind of fabric of
Yeah,
cycling, of like being part of this event, of its importance to this region, the many regions along it, and in the bigger kind of history of cycling in France. It just like that, it's just beautiful. It's just so meaningful, and like seeing three or four generations of a family or set of
yeah,
families in a little town that's cheering you on. It's just everything that everybody says about how cool that
yeah,
is true.
yeah.
And
I also
yeah,
think because I had kids as well, still have them, but it's kind of really special when your kids are at home or whatever, and you see all those kids at the side of the road. It's
yeah,
so cool. Actually, I
yeah.
forgot to ask you about your ass. I don't say that to another man very often, but I did forget to ask.
Hey,
Did it get worse or did it just maintain and just painful the whole way?
it it pretty much plateaued, and it was
Okay.
like, yeah. So like and I had to deal, like, in the 2 years prior. It just like it became a thing after I reached like 400K and above,
Yeah.
and I just wasn't able to figure it out. And I feel like I'm starting to turn a corner on that with I changed the seat posts, and I'm using one of those springy seat posts, and I'm
Okay.
trying a different non leather
Yeah.
saddle, one of these specialized saddles right now. And the Brevet rode recently, like I like it was different. It was actually quite different. And it's, these things take so much trial and error and time and money
Yeah.
too. Like you got to try and figure it out. But at that point, I was like, if this doesn't change, it's kind of just paying so much attention to those micro levels of discomfort. And it's like, where's your threshold? And like, can I keep, like, just a lot of just changing position constantly. And it was
Yeah.
like, it was pretty much a constant, like a high level of discomfort that didn't go into excruciating territory. And
Yeah.
like, I'm ending my ride. Like
Yeah.
it was another kind of like, sharpening of like, I'm not going to let this be the thing that ends this ride. I'm going to, if it stays here, I can manage it. And I felt really determined in that.
Yeah.
Um,
Perfect.
so yeah.
Cool.
And
So,
a lot of love and camaraderie and solidarity with all my fellow sufferers of
yeah,
any type of saddle sores. They can come in so many different shapes and
I
sizes,
know. Yeah.
and it can be just a
Yeah.
hard thing to deal with.
Yeah, and I also think part of it is it's just not normal for a human to do 1200K and not feel pain down there. So, anyway,
You know?
so tell me about are you going to do it again?
Yeah, I would love to. And I think my daughter really is like, you need to do it next chance you get, so I can come with you. That's
Okay.
very important there. So we'll
That-
see.
well, you got to make her happy,
And
so
it's
that's
like
good.
as if you
Yeah.
just like, maybe we try and take a trip and do a vacation and without me riding PPP. That could
Yeah.
also be something we consider.
Yeah.
But as an excuse to
Yeah.
get over there. And because I really, it was amazing. It was like one of the
Did you
coolest things I've ever done.
Yeah.
So
Did you feel even during maybe the lowest points of that ride in 2023 that I'm definitely coming back or I definitely would like to come back? Or is it something that happened afterwards?
afterwards, for me,
Okay.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was definitely like enjoying in it, just being in it. It's just like being in a different time warp. It's
Yeah.
so
It's a
all
bubble. Yeah.
consuming in it. And I think I wasn't thinking ahead. I wasn't like, but after, like, in sort of recovering the day after, and like I certainly couldn't think about sitting on a bicycle anytime.
I know.
And in fact,
Or
the
sitting at
next
all.
year I barely rode. In
Yeah,
2024, I was the lowest mileage I've gotten.
that's
I
funny.
barely,
Yeah, that's
in
funny.
part because I was trying, I got a whole really serious bike fit. I did a bunch of
Yeah,
interventions trying to figure out this stuff that I didn't get to do beforehand. So
yeah.
again, lessons learned, but yeah,
Well, cool.
it definitely grew as in terms of like the meaning of it, the for what it meant for me then, and the
That's cool.
memories that I developed, and what I'd like to share with other people as well. So
Yeah,
and
it's so
continue
true. Cool.
to enjoy that.
All right, Mark. Well, hopefully I will see you in
Yeah,
2027. Let's end then with your
yeah,
3 tips for someone who wants to do the next PBP. What do you
yeah.
recommend?
Um, so um, I think I spoke to this, but just to give the most you can to preparation, and be content with what you can give. So like finding a good acceptance of what you can give to the prep. You can do it. And and then I think tip 2 would be to enter the PvP year with the bike and the gear completely dialed in. So like everything as much as possible. If there's anything mechanical or otherwise fit wise, really the year prior in the qualifying year, like
Yep.
really, really trying to, or even earlier, even really kind of having the experience of qualification and the PvP year itself, where you're like,
Yeah.
you're really not dealing with major stuff with
Makes
dialing in
sense.
the bike. Yeah. And then, I think just per RV's, like we really bonded around the sort of jazz metaphor. I think just cribbing from him, just the balance between planning and anticipating and reacting to the inevitable changes to the plan. And like, I think that was really important for me, and not being too attached to
Yeah.
an outcome, but just to ride my ride.
Cool.
Yeah.
Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm glad that Arvi got us together. Really enjoyed this. Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you. Okay.
Likewise. And thanks for all the work you're doing, sharing these stories, Peter. I look forward to riding with you someday.
Definitely.